What is up, everybody? I'm Nolex Given here with your afternoon snap, and today Shuri's lab is the featured location, and I've been having a ton of fun with this deck. This is just a really fun list. We're going to take a look at a few games in just a moment, but basically I wanted to play a deck that already had Shuri in it, because I figured if the deck already has Shuri in it, then it's a pretty good deck, and it's just even more insane when her lab shows up. And this deck is a ton of fun. It's got a lot of cool and unique combos in it. If you haven't seen it already, you're in for a treat. Like I said, we're going to take a look at 3 games in this video, and we are kicking things off with a sweet one where our second location is that featured Shuri's lab, which is obviously really good for this deck. There's a lot of cool things that we can do with it, and we're going to start things off by throwing Wolverine into the Shuri's lab. Really, we could throw Wolverine into Shuri's lab or into the Nebula location to stop my opponent from getting 2 power there, but the reason to put it into Shuri's lab is because one of the cool combos that we're actually not going to even look at in this video is to just put a bunch of power into Shuri's lab and then eat all of that power with a Venom, which will then double itself, and then you can copy all of that doubled up power onto a huge Taskmaster. But we're going to be looking at some other cool stuff in this one. Speaking of which, we get to see the new Spider-Man in action. Let me know your thoughts on the new Spider-Man. I like it. I like having all of the spider cards related to movement effects. Obviously, it's not as powerful as it was before, but I still think it's pretty cool to have all of the spider cards have some unique synergies in that capacity. On turn 4, I'm just going to play Bucky Barnes. I'm not going to play Carnage because we're going to be able to destroy Bucky Barnes later with Destroyer, and I don't want Destroyer to just destroy the Winter Soldier and Carnage. I'd rather it give me a Winter Soldier. My opponent's going to use Polaris to move Wolverine into Limbo and potentially stop me from stopping their Nebula is kind of the idea behind it. And then on turn 5, I'm just going to play Nimrod into Shuri's lab. We draw the Shuri, unfortunately, on turn 5, so we don't get to make an absolutely massive Nimrod in this game, but we will still get to do some fun stuff with Nimrod and Destroyer and Taskmaster because of Shuri's lab. So we potentially get to do some other fun stuff with this. Destroyer is a really powerful card with a really powerful drawback, but we get to make it even more powerful with Shuri's lab, and in this game we're also going to be making good use of Limbo because we get to play Destroyer on turn 6, and then we still get to play Taskmaster to follow that up on the next turn. Magik in this deck is sometimes there to make use of the 7th turn of the game, and sometimes it's just there to draw 1 card deeper into your deck so you can draw more fun combo pieces. Unfortunately, my opponent hits us this turn with the Shadow King, so they are going to somewhat limit the ability of us to make great use of Nimrod, but we are still going to get a massive Destroyer, and we'll be able to surprise my opponent with Taskmaster, copying that next turn, which, like, all of the plays that we've made so far this game are just plays that a Destroyer or a Destroy deck would play. Lost my train of thought there, but the Taskmaster is a really nice surprise here. It's just 5 energy, 30 power, and then I'll even get to play Carnage to move over some more Nimrods. And what's crazy about this game is my opponent actually got pretty lucky. They high-rolled an additional copy of Silver Surfer out of Camp Lehigh, which we turned into Limbo with Magik on turn 3, but it's not going to matter. Double Silver Surfer is no match for double 30 power, and we are able to take my opponent there for 4 cubes. This second game is equally as spicy, though without Shuri's lab this time. We do have Throne Room, which is kind of like a Shuri's lab, and then we also have actual Shuri. And then we have Sinister London, which is just always a really fun and zany location, though Sinister London is not really that great with Shuri, because you have to play the card there, wherever Shuri has its on-reveal ability, so you won't be able to make use of the Shuri into Sinister London, but then whatever card you double, you will be able to make use of in Sinister London, because the Sinister London copy will retain the buffs that original Shuri gave it. So there are definitely some synergies potentially here, though it's going to get a little bit trickier to make use of those synergies as my opponent hits me with the Spider Ham to take down my Taskmaster. That is definitely one downside of this deck. Spider Ham, all of the cards are very synergistic, unless you get your Destroyer Spider Hammed. That one is actually really good. My opponent is going to Enchantress my Invisible Woman. They're hitting me from a lot of different angles here and being very disruptive. We've also drawn a rock from their Korg. So yeah, my opponent's got a lot of powerful things going on. But we do get to play a 12 power Nimrod, and that's really tough to disrupt. Mainly because they can't like Shang-Chi it. We're still gonna have a bunch of 12 power Nimrods if they Shang-Chi me. So we're kind of doing okay here. And then on turn 6, I'm just gonna drop Destroyer. And the first Destroyer will be destroyed by the second Destroyer off of Sinister London. But the important thing here is that both of those destroyers will destroy all of the Nimrods, and it's basically just going to fill my board with Nimrods, and I'm actually not going to have much space to play anything next turn. But it's kind of okay, and the reason that that's okay is because, well, okay, I don't want to spoil it here, but there actually isn't going to be a next turn. My opponent hits me with Legion on the final turn to turn everything into Sinister London twice, and we just completely dominate them on the power front. They tried to get a little bit cheeky and surprise us by ending the game a little bit sooner, but we just had way too much power that they couldn't compete with. Now you might notice that Legion is in our deck list as well, and it's not really that synergistic with the deck. I just think that Legion is a good card, and it's a reasonable curve out of a turn 4 Shuri to then play a turn 5 Legion, and then you have 16 power at that location. So I do think that Legion is good. After this game, I'm going to discuss some other cards that you could potentially sub in instead of Legion in this list. I actually only have Legion in this list because a few weeks ago there was a weekend mission when Legion launched where you had to win games with Legion, and this is the deck that I was having fun with playing at the time. So I threw Legion in, and it didn't really hurt the deck, but there's a lot of other fun cards that you can play as well. So I'll be talking about those things in a moment. Turn 3 this game, we're going to hit a Magik. We're going to throw Magik into Oscorp Tower, just so that way there's double limbo. And speaking of Legion, that way I don't have to worry about Legion taking out my limbos or like Storm. We're seeing that my opponent's playing a Daredevil list. That way I don't have to worry about limbo getting stormed, and we will definitely get a turn 7 this game. We actually draw our own Legion, and my opponent has Daredevil, Jeff the Baby Landshark, and a turn 4 Atuma. Now, here's where things get interesting. This is turn 5 and my opponent has Daredevil Sight. The way that this deck works, and I haven't really showed off this combo just yet, but when you throw a Taskmaster under Invisible Woman, what you get to do is then play Destroyer into Shuri'd up Shuri's lab, and Shuri won't see the card that Invisible Woman has played. And you know what? I'm actually going to pause this game for just a moment here. So Shuri doesn't see anything under Invisible Woman as getting played yet. And similarly, Taskmaster will check the last card played at the end of the game. So this is the key combo in the deck to really understand. Now what we get to do on turn 6 is drop a massive card into Shuri on Shuri's lab, and then if we don't play anything else for the rest of the game, or actually if it's a Destroyer, that will destroy the Invisible Woman, which will then allow the Taskmaster to reveal itself and become a 60 power Taskmaster. So that's just one of the combos that we have at our disposal. But the other thing that I have to talk about here, there's a lot going on this turn. My opponent's got Daredevil, Jeff the Baby Landshark, and Atuma. They're obviously playing Professor X, right? So that is definitely something that I'm a little bit fearful of. However, my opponent doesn't have great options for Professor X this game. They can't Professor X into Limbo because we're going to win that location with Taskmaster. Jeff the Baby Landshark isn't going to be able to save my opponent there. If my opponent Professor X's into Shuri's lab, well, they're probably going to lose in limbo still, and then they're in an awkward place in this second limbo because they're going to wind up destroying their Attuma. So I thought this was kind of a risky play, but kind of a safe play at the same time. I really don't want my opponent to play a Professor X into Shuri's lab because then I can't drop my 60 power destroyer. But at the same time, I think they're just going to wind up playing Professor X into Limbo and then battling it out with me in Shuri's lab on the final turn. Let's see how it goes and if that is indeed what my opponent goes for. So might have to fast forward here a little bit now. There we go. Okay, Professor X, it's going to protect Attuma, and then I realize I can actually get a little bit cheeky with it. So we figure out what my opponent's current power is. Legion is going to be for 32 power, which would mean they would have to put down 22 power on this final turn, which isn't that much. It's only 11 power, but they actually just don't have it. 11 power is still a lot for them to try to come up with, and they only have 8 power multiplied by 2 for 16. So we get to play a doubled up Legion and get rid of both Limbos. That's why I love Legion. There's just always silly stuff that you can come up with that card. And then Taskmaster gets to hop into the other Shuri's lab, doubling itself again for a total of 67 power to snag the win. Here's some other cards you can try I figured I would mention. So the first thing that I would use as a direct replacement for Legion and what I was playing in the deck before Legion came out was Hobgoblin. The main synergy with Hobgoblin is it still has a lot of power that you can double with Shuri and her lab, but it's a little bit more synergistic with Destroyer because you can send all of that negative power to your opponent's side of the board, and then you don't have to worry about destroying all of that power with Destroyer because it's not your problem anymore. Though there are some other strong 5-cost cards like Arrow, Red Skull, or even potentially Vision that you could still run in this Legion slot if you either don't have Legion or just want to try out some other interesting tech options. Especially Arrow can mess around with Shuri and Shuri's lab today, so that could definitely be something to look out for. Red Skull plus Shuri is just a pretty straightforward combo, still pretty good with Venom as well. Did not get to see that much Venom in this video, and I'm going to talk more about Venom and Invisible Woman in just a second. Some other things that you could play are more destroy effects. Negasonic Teenage Warhead is another destroy effect, and the Hood, Nova, and Sabretooth are all good cards to destroy. Just remembering right now that I missed one other card, and that is going to be Hulkbuster. The next category of cards that I was going to talk about, and Nova kind of fits in this category, is cards that buff up your current power. Because those effects work even better with Shuri's lab. Before I get to that though, I just wanted to mention that the Hood, part of the reason that that effect can be strong in the deck is because you're going to wind up destroying it with one of many of your different destroy effects, and then on the final turn of the game, you get to play Taskmaster plus the Demon from the Hood. So it just uses your energy efficiently in games where you don't have magic, of course. Hulkbuster is really, really cool with Shuri's lab because it comes in, attaches to something. So let's say that Hulkbuster attaches to a 2/2 Wolverine, which is now a 4/4 Wolverine in Shuri's lab, right? Hulkbuster is going to attach to the Wolverine, so it will go up to 9, and then it will double up to 18. So that can be super, super powerful. And then, of course, whenever Wolverine reanimates, then it would go up to just 20. It would only get 2 more after that. But that can still be a huge, huge boost of power I'll mention this now. Venom, I might have actually mentioned this in the first game of this video, but you can play Venom, eat all of the things that you've doubled up in power already in Shuri's lab to grab a really, really large Venom, and then Venom itself will double in the same way that Hulkbuster will, and you can also copy that with Taskmaster, and that's also one of the reasons that Hulkbuster is potentially good in a Taskmaster list as well. So that's another inclusion that you might definitely want to think about. Forge, Nakia, and to some extent Nova are also good when you're doubling your power already, because this +2 from Forge, which is probably the one that I'd recommend, you play Forge and then you play Nimrod into Shuri's lab. It's going to come down for 8 and then it's going to double up to 16, and then you can destroy that a bunch of times. If you are destroying a bunch of things, Arnim Zola, Null, and Death can be interesting payoff cards, though I've often found that you don't need those or want to do those. Sometimes they're useful in Magik games and potentially useful in the mirror. They're kind of win more cards in this deck, and by that I mean they're good in games that you were already going to win, and they're not necessarily useful in other games. So Arnim Zola does have some utility for its ability to destroy Nimrod, and that becomes easier to access today with Shuri's lab as the featured location, though if you don't have Shuri's lab, then it's a 50-50 that Arnim Zola will hit Nimrod or potentially just hit the Shuri. So that's something that you do have to watch out for. But one other thing to watch out for is the other really cool combo in this deck that I really did not get to showcase, and that is also with Invisible Woman, which is what helps it earn the spot in the deck. Oh, I should mention too, you could cut Bucky Barnes and Wolverine. Both of these cards are definitely cuttable if you want to go heavier into the Shuri's lab of it all today. Cut those cards, just play like Hulkbuster and Forge, and just go nuts in the Shuri's lab while that's the featured location. But the one thing that I also wanted to mention with this deck that can be a lot of fun is you play a turn 2 Invisible Woman, and then turn 3 you just put Deathlok or Venom behind the Invisible Woman. The plan there is to then on turn 5 play Nimrod, and then turn 6 you can still play multiple destroy effects. You can play Venom plus Carnage, and then the Deathlok or the Venom, whatever you have inside the Invisible Woman, will reveal itself at the end of the game to destroy those Nimrods and get even more Nimrods everywhere else on the board, and that can always be a lot of fun and a lot of power. So check it out, let me know what you think of the deck, but for today, that's going to be it for me. Thank you guys very much for watching. I'm No Lex Given. Peace.